Good morning. Welcome to North Carolina. I hope you're finding some time to get out and enjoy Raleigh. But today we are here to learn how to write a winning BRIC application without hiring a consultant. So thank you for joining us, and let's get started. By joining us today, I know you've already familiarized yourself with what BRIC is, Building Resilience in Communities. This is the fourth year of the grant opportunity through FEMA. And what we're going to do is talk you through the program and just show you what we've been teaching our sub-applicants in North Carolina about how to write a winning BRIC application with or without a consultant. First, just a quick bio about myself and how I'm qualified to teach you this today. I do write the BRIC grants for North Carolina, but as a background, I've been working in grants for maybe the past 25 years or so, starting out in the arts, working from the government side. And then I really think I've learned the most that is able to help you today through serving as a panelist for these federal agencies, including FEMA. It really has helped me to learn from the funder's perspective what it is they're looking for and how to write a winning federal grant application. So the number one thing, and I'm going to share with you our website here in the state of North Carolina, is just to make sure that you read the program materials before applying. You want to make sure that you are, for this opportunity, preventing the risk of a natural hazard to public infrastructure in some way. You want to make sure that you are competitive for the BRIC process and you're meeting the priorities that they're looking to fund. We have resources, winning grants, and the notice of funding opportunity from last year on our ncdps.gov/BRIC site. Your state will also have this information, and they'll update it, hopefully, as needed. Be sure to take a look at that because those are going to be very, very important resources for you. And FEMA has some tips and guidance on their website as well, which we'll be sharing with you. I just point out that I like to take a 3-color highlighter and go through that notice of funding opportunity. I use yellow for budget and allowable cost items, blue for key phrases and lingo, and then technical and qualitative scoring and criteria and prompts I highlight in yellow. Those are going to be very important as you're writing your narrative to make sure that you're using the language that FEMA is encouraging you to use as you're writing the application. You want to make sure that you know the process in and out. Folks think that it's all about selling the need, and I guess for some federal grants it might be, but for this one, it is really about the scoring. You want to make sure that you know those scoring in the qualitative and the technical items, and that you are meeting them, that you're addressing them, and capturing the full points that are available for to you. So here's the process. It starts off at the state level. I'm hoping that your state puts it through some sort of filter before they pass it through to FEMA. I think that as winning the most actual number of projects in the first couple of years of the program, that was really the key to our success. Was we put it through a state prioritization panel and scored it using FEMA's criteria, and then passed it back to the sub-applicant and said, this is the improvements that our panel has recommended that you make. That is an important key part. And if your state does not offer that, we're going to talk to you about doing it yourself, using your staff to review it before you pass it through to a competitive federal grant process. It's going to go through a technical review. That technical review is done at the region level. That's FEMA staff that goes through that and scores it based on the technical scoring items that you'll find in the notice of funding opportunity. And then there's a qualitative review. Now, what they do with that is that's where they bring volunteers from other states on and other FEMA staff and that sort of thing, the state hazard mitigation officers, and they read it and they score it using the qualitative scoring criteria that I was encouraging you to familiarize yourself with. That's a peer panel that does that. And then the final step is the BCA and technical feasibility. And boy, is that the key portion to this grant process. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time on talking to you about that. Be sure to ask your state hazard mitigation officer for the NTR notes from prior years, similar project types. If they won't give you those, I would push back because that is going to be a key item that, you know, would help you a great deal in knowing how to get a BCA through without being thrown out for BCA technical issues. Should we hire a consultant? That's the question with this webinar today. I would say I want to point out it is reimbursable under the BRIC subaward as development costs. Pre-award costs shy of construction are reimbursable under the BRIC opportunity. It's also very useful during the environmental and historic preservation review. If you're selected, they come back to you with a request for information period that can go 18 months up to 24 months sometimes in just getting this through the EHP process. And boy, is it helpful if you have a consultant on board to be there to attend those meetings and to help with that coordination. But your staff can do it, and FEMA is on board to help you if you're just using the staff to do that. They also may have some prior BCA experience. I would encourage you, if you are getting a consultant, to make sure that they have infrastructure BCA experience. It's quite different than using pre-calculated benefits. There are three main components of the application. There's the benefit cost analysis, which we're going to spend a little bit of time on. That is really the heaviest lift in the application. If you are finding that your city council or your county commissioners are only allowing for a small amount of money to be used to hire a consultant, perhaps just hire them for the benefit cost analysis could be something that you consider. Then there's the FEMA Go application itself, which we would encourage you to keep simple and friendly to the reader, because that is where the qualitative panel is looking to capture your points. And then there's the all-important supporting attachments. And so what I'm going to do is share with you a key tool that we've used for our North Carolina state sub-applicants to organize those attachments and make it friendly to the reader and help them to give you maximum points. And just a note to your city council, BRIC is an annual opportunity. So if you're getting pushback, well, we don't know whether we're going to get the money, we don't want to allocate the money to hire a consultant to help us with this, it is an annual grant opportunity, which means if you don't win this year, you're going to get some valuable feedback from FEMA, which will help you to make your second year's application all the more better. We noticed a lot of our winners in the second year were people who had not won in the first year. And I think that feedback that we're getting from FEMA is very helpful to make you more competitive in that second round, or third or fourth or fifth. It is multiple year. So definitely go to the FEMA website, take a look at that link that I'm sharing with you on the screen. You're going to find the link to downloading the BCA 6.0 toolkit. You're also going to find the Excel compatible add-in within your Excel. There's directions on that site about how to do that. That is what we get the most calls about as people are learning the BCA. I think they can't get some of our examples to open, but that's because you don't have the Excel add-in, which is very important. It'll be in the top right-hand corner of your screen. It looks like that. If you don't have that when you open Excel, you need to add that in. It's free. It's easy to get, and you can get that using that link at the top or by searching add-ins in your Excel program. That is available, by the way, that toolkit in the browser and the desktop versions. If you have an older version of Excel, you might not, or sometimes an even newer version, you can't get it to work. So if that's the case, just use the browser version. You can always open the BCA there. And then the PowerPoint training linked to the website above. And just go to Google and search. You'll find some other states, I think maybe Texas. I know we've done some. Just videos out there to help guide you through learning what the BCA is all about. Look, it's just a calculator. You just put in the information and then you back up the information with data or some sort of explanation as to the assumptions that you've made in those numbers. I would say 80% of the problems that we get from FEMA, well, the problems are with the BCA that we've submitted, is that it's not backed by data, that you can't just plug in a number. even if it's a letter from your city manager. As I recall, we were out of power this many days in these years because of hurricanes blank, blank, and blank. That's data. That's backup. You want stronger than that, but if that's all you can get, make sure you provide it. Nothing is not going to work. So inside that BCA calculator, this is what you see. Each item has a plug-in where you plug in numbers, and then I want to point out that the most important thing is where that arrow is going. That eye right there will really show you how to find the information that you need. It goes through each item and tells you what information, where you can go to get that information. It'll tell you the project useful life. Notice that's the first one. So embarrassing to get a note back from FEMA that says you've used the incorrect project useful life, when all you needed to do is click that little eye in the top right, and it'll tell you for that project type what the acceptable project useful life is. And then do ask your state hazard mitigation officer for winning BCAs from last year's, particularly if it's a project type that's similar to yours. That's going to help you in putting your BCA together. There's 2 guidance documents linked on that website. I'm showing them on the screen. They're quite extensive. The first one, 108 pages. The second, 130 pages. So it's a lot. Control F is your friend. If you're looking for something specific, open that document and search for that word. That'll help bring you to the items in the guidance that you're looking for. And just points of note, last year, 31 of our 53 sub-applications were rejected for BCA or technical feasibility issues. That's a large number, and a lot of them were not just done at the local level. They used consultants even, and still were booted because of BCA things. And, you know, and then a lot of times those things were argued, but there's only one person that FEMA hires to review your application, your BCA, for technical feasibility and FEMA credible methodology. And they're the judge. So what they say goes, and they'll provide you with that feedback, which will help you in the second year. You must back every calculator input with documentation or some sort of assumption narrative. That's called your BCA methodology, which I'll make sure that we include in the required attachments as we go through that in a moment. And if you're not selected, as we were saying, that NTR note that they give you, that's the National Technical Review notes, explains all of the BCA issues that they found, and will be very helpful to you in the second year again. BCA waiver for economically disadvantaged rural communities, that's important. That was added last year, and I expect that that will be even just as important this year. What that means, if you are an economically disadvantaged rural community, an EDRC, is that you must have a population of under 3,000 and an average per capita income that does not exceed 80% of the national per capita income. So both of those things have to be in place for you to qualify as an EDRC. It means that you get extra points in the scoring. It also means that you get an increased federal cost share. It'll go to 90-10 or 88-12 if you're trying to capture the overmatch points, which is encouraged. And then also there's that BCA waiver. Now that BCA waiver is important. It doesn't mean you don't have to submit a BCA. You still do. It just means that they won't reject your application. Remember I said 31 out of the 53? Now they won't reject your application. If you are an EDRC, they'll put the FEMA staff towards helping you. If they select your project to move forward for award, they'll put the FEMA team behind helping you to get that BCA in order. Also, this is important, check out the Centers for Disease Control Social Vulnerability Index. That's the SVI score. If your SVI score in your census tract for your project area is greater than 0.80, you're not an EDRC, but you do still qualify for that BCA waiver, which is so important. And here's a look at that website. It'll allow you to zoom right in to your counties, your cities, and the census tracts within those to get your SVI score, which is important for you to know as you start this application. And I know Brandon Sweezes is going to be talking to you today, and FMA has an even lower threshold for that, which is over a 0.50. So do know your SVI score. And kudos if you are able to come up with a 0.80 or higher. That's going to give you a great advantage in the BRIC program. We're also trying to address that Justice 40 initiative that came out of the Biden administration that says that 40% of federal funds in these programs are to go to disadvantaged communities. That's not the same as economically disadvantaged rural communities. Disadvantaged communities can be anything that addresses these items that you see over to the right here. Those characterizations, disproportionate climate impacts are one that I point out a lot, because even if you're a wealthy community and you're on the coast, guess what? You have disproportionate climate change impacts in your future, and you can make there's a lot of data out there to help you with that. So be sure to check out the Justice 40 initiative. By the way, this is just a FEMA slide I'm showing to you here that we've captured from their training sessions. This is North Carolina's grant timeline for BRIC 23, assuming that the grant deadlines are going to stay the same when the NOFO comes out in August. Be sure to check out your own state's deadlines, because what FEMA prints, that's the state's deadline in applying. Your state is going to have a different deadline for you to apply to them. Remember, the local applies to the state applies to FEMA. And so do check those when they come out, probably in late summer, early fall from your state. The second major component in that grant application is the FEMA Go application itself. So what I'm going to do is just show you some screenshots of what that looks like on the inside of FEMA Go. Work with your state to go ahead and get access to FEMA Go so that you're ready to start your application when that notice of funding opportunity comes out. This is just a screenshot of what FEMA Go looks like on the inside in the scope of work section. Is it a phased project? What's the population percentage that is affected by this proposed project? And then they want to know what is a clear and detailed description of your proposed activity. You want to provide a nice, clean, and succinct answer. We encourage you to answer that question in the very first sentence. Don't make the reader have to look for what it is you're trying to do in that scope of work. It should go, we're doing A, B, and C, and then spend the rest of the time breaking down A, B, and C and describing those duties that are included in your scope of work. And then use your attachments to describe them even further. This is your main sub-applicant information. You're going to want to make sure that that first contact in FEMA Go is made by the primary contact in sam.gov. That might take just a little bit of time. So, and sometimes, you know, employees have changed and that person doesn't work here anymore. sam.gov has a process and a phone number you can call to send a letter on letterhead to get that main contact changed. So start early to make sure that you have the needed access in FEMA Go. And then what you'll see over to the left, I've sort of stacked two screenshots here. The tabs just show you all of the different components inside of that FEMA Go application. It's not that complicated, really. Contact information, how does it align with your mitigation plan? Notice I've circled that here. You do want to make sure it is a requirement that you do have a FEMA approved regional hazard mitigation plan. So you want to check with your state hazard mitigation officer and make sure you're up to date on that so that you'll qualify to apply. In North Carolina, we stay on top of that, and we don't really have any counties right now that do not have a local plan approved by FEMA. There's the scope of work, there's the schedule where you'll go through and designate a go, no-go milestone. All of that's in the notice of funding opportunity. Your budget is there. And by the way, in that budget, make sure that there's no contingencies greater than 5%. I know a lot of times those quotes come in with a much higher contingency. You need to get that reworked. They're not going to fund anything that is over 5% on the contingency. And know that this time frame of the approval is going, you know, a year to 3 years right now in getting to the physical award once you're awarded. So make sure that those cost estimates are taking into account that it might be 2 years from now or 3 when you actually get the green light to move forward with your construction project. And then the evaluation, I think I'm going to show you a screenshot of that evaluation. I noticed in serving as a FEMA panelist that this is where people make the biggest mistake. It looks like a bunch of check boxes, a bunch of yes, no, one word answers. But then there's those two hiding questions at the bottom about your partnerships and your future conditions, which are worth 35 points in the qualitative scoring. So don't skip over that. That evaluation section is so important, and you don't want to leave those 35 points on the table. I'm not going to go into a huge description of the scoring, the qualitative scoring, but do review that in the notice of funding opportunity. Remember, it is the most important part. And if you do not have a state that puts it through a state prioritization panel, then have city or colleagues score your application using FEMA's scoring criteria. That filter is going to be oh so important, and they'll come back and say, I didn't see where you talked about implementation measures. I didn't see where you listed your partners. And you don't want to leave those points on the table in a federal grant, competitive grant application. What you're seeing here is what we require, the state of North Carolina requires from our sub-applicants in putting forward their sub-application. We want to see an attachment that directly corresponds to each one of the qualitative scoring items in blue at the top. And so what I mean by that, let's take a look at the far right, leveraging partners. What's going to be inside there? Well, your letters of support, any emails that have gone back and forth that would justify the coordination between you and, say, Department of Transportation or another entity of government who's worked with you on this. That attachment is so important. And then at the bottom, the green ones, that's your benefit cost analysis, your BCA methodology. If that's not there, how is that reviewer going to know how you came up with that number? So make sure that BCA methodology is included. And then also, to follow the best practices of FEMA, they also want you to include that in the BCA tool itself. There's a place where you can click your explanation beside each one of your inputs. Do both. They ask you to do that. The technical feasibility support is one that you would put any prior studies that have been done to support the need for this project and the engineering behind it. And then the technical scoring support, which addresses each one of the technical scoring criteria items. That helps that region staff maximize your points that they're giving you in the technical scoring support. You're waving the flag, you're saying, here it is. So what I'm showing you here is another FEMA slide that just shows you that first scoring item, which is worth 35 points for risk reduction and resiliency. And this is FEMA's slide, and it is used not only in training you how to write that application, but it's used in training the panelists on what to look for, those questions over there. If I don't give you full points, I'm going to go right to those prompts as a panelist and say the sub-applicant did not fully describe how the proposed project will improve resilience. You know, I'm not going to just make up things that I'm looking for. I go right to FEMA's scoring prompts. And so effective risk reduction, increase in community resilience, ancillary benefits, leverage to innovation. Those are the things you want to make sure you're using that lingo. Look, this slide comes directly from FEMA. It's the first scoring criterion worth 35 points, and it shows in BRIC 2021 what they consider to be the best example of what was able to capture the full 35 points in that category. So what we've done is created a template that just makes it look exactly like that and lists those 4 items and says, waves the flag. Here's where we have increased resilience. Here's where we have ancillary benefits, and just bullet point what's going to be found inside of that attachment so that you're making sure you're addressing all 4 of those questions that the panelist is looking for. Make it friendly to the reader. I have to remind you that on every federal grant panel I've ever served on, I think one of the 3 is lazy, and they haven't done their homework. They've half done their work, and it's up to the other 2 to sort of help guide them. They haven't really followed the directions. It's just the way it works, with some exceptions. But you want to make sure that that narrative is nice and simple inside of FEMA Go, and that the attachments are complicated. And maybe complicated is not the right word, extensive. The attachments should be where you kill them with tons of data. But the narrative is nice and simple inside FEMA Go. And then that last sentence says, please refer to the population impacted attachment for more information. And that gets them where they need to be. Then guess what that lazy reader might do? They might go, oh, they got this one, because they see that you have an attachment that just describes it in language that they don't want to take time to read. I'm sorry to say, but it could happen to be the case. FEMA Go does have some formatting limitations. Play to that. What I'm showing you here is what that reviewer looks at. It doesn't even give you the benefit of paragraph indentations. So what I would encourage you to do is take the language that is inside of the NOFO and capitalize those things so that you have certain words that pop out. And those are the words that the reviewer is looking for to give you the full score. And here's those words, going back to a FEMA slide for that first one. Risk reduction should be capitalized. Ancillary benefits should be capitalized. This is how this demonstrates innovation. I would capitalize that in your FEMA Go application to wave the flag again to that reader. Implementation measures, the third one. Here's just looking over the FEMA slides here. How does it inspire confidence? How did you identify your technical and managerial staff, which, by the way, is one that very few people do. So make sure that you do. And does it address potential implementation challenges? That one's missing a lot. By the way, that should be in your implementation measures attachment. Make sure you have a section called potential implementation challenges. I mean, that's not hard to talk about what might happen. And that is it in our fast and furious session on how to write a winning BRIC application without a consultant. And now that I think about it, I just want to add, but if you can, do. It is going to help you quite a bit if you do hire a consultant. I would not want to discourage you from doing that if your city council or your county commissioners will allow you to. So thank the group for helping us get this information across to you. Hopefully some of our North Carolina sub-applicants are listening today. Even if we have helped some other states in competing against us, the goal is to make sure that we're maximizing these federal funds that are available. These are unprecedented federal investments in local infrastructure, so do take the time to make sure you're writing a good application so that the feds can fund your project and help your community for many years to come. Thanks for joining us, and good luck.